This meeting is being
Hi, Deborah Colleen Rose here, and we are in the Law of Relativity and our continuation of the series of the fundamental laws of the universe. So, when we're discussing relativity, it's kind of a hard thing to grasp, like some of these laws are, because they seem to contradict themselves. But everyone is tested as an opportunity to grow and strengthen. The law of relativity states that nothing is good or bad, big or small, until you relate it to something. And this is the premise of a lot of good therapy techniques out there, in handwriting therapy, for an example. There are all types of traits. We can measure 350 traits of the personality, and there is no right or wrong. It is only something that you know to do and you've learned to do to survive. So I like the idea that there's no judgment there until you actually relate it to something, maybe relating it to your belief system, relating it to other people's belief system. So one of the things that we included in the book says, if everything were relative, including truths, then it would be absolutely true, an absolute truth. Everything is relative, and that would be self-refuting. So wrap your head around that. So this was fun, and it's completely mind-bending. The simplest definition of relative is existing or having a specific nature only by relation to something else, not absolute or independent. So you don't have anything to compare it to, then there's no relativity. You have to be able to compare it to something. The law of relativity tells us that something in our physical world is only made real by its relationship or comparison to something. Light only exists because we compare it to dark. Good can only exist because we compare it to bad. Hot compared to cold. Is this reality, or is it a judgment based upon our perception, or both? All things are relative. If you're an average income earner and you compare yourself to a millionaire, your economic situation will not good. But if you compare yourself to a poor boy in Africa, your situation would be one of abundance. There is no big nor small, fast nor slow, except by comparison. Everything just is. How we relate is relative. Ponder that for a second. Once we put a relationship definition on something, it affects our attitudes, our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions. When you relate something you do only fairly well to do something another person has mastered, you will not look good. You're using the law against yourself. Begin using this law to heighten your self-esteem. When you compare yourself to those who have not mastered a talent or ability, how do you feel then? Do you feel less than adequate? Do you feel hopeful? Or maybe you even feel masterful? Again, all three of these emotions could be valid, but they are based upon your equation of the comparison. Whenever the law is properly used, you win. How is that possible? Let's remember that everyone does something better than you, and likewise, you do something better than everyone you meet. This means there is no good or bad, only room to change and grow. So one of the things that was brought up is that if we're just noting a relationship, fine. But the problem can be, though, is that judging whether it is good or not. This defeats the intention of the law. Well, let's think about that. Nothing in life has any meaning except for the meaning we give it. So make sure to use the law of relativity in your favor. Why choose anything less? Because it is about choice. You may see yourself as poor, but if your household brings in more than $24,000 a year in income, you are actually in the top 10% of all wage earners in the world. To someone in another country only earning $14 a week, you are wealthy beyond imagination. So how do you determine if you are wealthy? Again, it is all relative. The law of relativity can work in conjunction with the other 11 universal laws only if you know how to use it to your benefit. If all things are relative, if we determine big and what's small, what's rich and what's poor, what's good and bad by what we relate it to, maybe we should be diligent in choosing what we compare things to. Think about that. Who are you comparing yourself to? Who are your role models? Are they congruent with everything that you are and what you want to be? There's a lot of rich people in this world that have millions and billions of dollars. But do you want to be like them in other areas as well? It's all relative. We already know that from the other universal laws, we need to be grateful and we need to be positive. So why not compare our situation to one that would not be effective in our own lives? An idea of achievement or success that we consider less than our own. If we do this, we will continue to be positive and grateful for what we have and what we are. So Sharon made a comment while we were writing this book. She says, I don't like this whole concept of comparison. This makes me very uncomfortable. She said a comparison in the way that we're expressing it requires a judgment. Cold is not better than hot. There is no right or wrong temperature. So I responded to this saying that as I was researching this, I found most of the interpretations were encouraging judgment instead of evaluation. You know, it's one thing to have an opinion, and you take your opinion and you use that as your evaluation, and then if you deem it right or wrong, that's a judgment. And I think people confuse those levels. But I told her, I said, you're right. It isn't about judgment of better and worse, good or bad. It's really about evaluating what works and what is effective in a given situation. So Sharon said again, she goes, if I'm at the equator, an inside temperature of 80 degrees might be quite cool when I compare it to the outside temperature of 110 degrees. I get that. I think, though, it is more useful to look at human behavior for our relative comparisons. If I live outside a large U.S. city where the average household income is $65,000 a year, it would be more useful to compare my own income to the income that is average, because that both reflects and affects the cost of living in that city. So we're bringing in practicalities into our assessments. I am still willing to use, I'm still using a relationship to determine how effective my income is. In this specific environment with these specific needs and wants, am I relatively successful in achieving the results I want? This also means I have to determine what I need or want. So I can determine whether I am relatively successful or relatively wealthy or relatively financially secure based on an internal or external factors that are not based on a comparison to other people's performance or income. Now, I'm not comparing myself to others, but I'm evaluating based on the relationship of what I'm achieving to what I want to achieve. One example of this, and I learned this very early on in my adult life because I've been self-employed since I was around 19, 20 years old. And it wasn't always looking at the bottom dollar. It was always looking at whether or not I had certain things covered. And I also came up with the concept of that if I was able to save money, that was even better than making money. So I included that as part of my net worth. So for instance, we had to have a lot of plumbing work done recently, and it was in the 5-digit, almost 6-digit arena by the time we were done. Fortunately, our insurance covered all that. So in my mind, I counted that as income because by buying the right insurance policy and having that intact and making sure that was taken care of, I didn't have to come up with $100,000 to pay for my plumbing bill. The insurance covered it, so that was the same as me making it. That may be a little twisted for some of you, but it works for me. You will always be able to find someone that is better than you or that has more than you, but you will always find someone that is not as good as you that can be less than you. It is all relative. The important thing is to leave your ego aside. Quit comparing yourself. Everyone can do something better than you, and you can do something better than everyone else. Start focusing on the things that you have that are beneficial, effective, fulfilling, and bring joy. Be grateful for what you have, and you will start attracting what you want faster. Now, from a spiritual point of view, you can remove barriers of labeling and accept everything as is. From A New Earth by Toll, inform you are and will always be inferior to some, superior to others. In essence, you're neither inferior nor superior to anyone. True self-esteem and true humility arise out of the realization in the eyes of the ego, self-esteem and humility are all contradictory. In truth, they are one and the same. Take some time with that. So each person has opportunities, probably daily, probably more than one, for the purpose of strengthening the light within them and giving them pause to analyze not just their environment, but how they as a person fit into the environment, how they affect that environment, and how they can grow and change both themselves and their environment. The law also teaches us to compare our problems to others, to put them in a proper perspective. No matter how bad we perceive our situation to be, there's always someone who is in a worse position. So if we're better off than others, how can we effect more positive change for all? The question is, what is relative? Am I to say that to you the answer is all relative? What will you do with it? So the bottom line is, the law of relativity is really about gratitude. Choose to see the world through grateful eyes, and it will never look the same again. I hope y'all have a great day, and we're almost through with the book. I'll see you again real soon.